I heard it best recently, like who as a leader do you want to find yourself taking in information from the most? A lot of times it's probably the newest people in the company. And I know that they also don't have a lot of context with regards to being around the company for a long period of time, but they're going to probably have some fresh perspective. And I think young people have a lot greater pulse on culture and some of the things that are going on where certain other people can kind of be set in their ways. We're busy, we know how to do things, and their lens gets a little bit more narrow.
Hi, I'm Jason Max, and this is Moderately Mike. Today I'm joined by Dr. Josh Funk, a Montgomery County native, former Division I lacrosse player, physical therapist, and entrepreneur. We're going to talk about his journey, what motivates him, and the lessons he's learned about leadership, technology, growth, and building a successful company. Josh, welcome to Moderately Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So for anyone who's not familiar with your work already, can you introduce yourself and tell us about Rehab to Perform?
Yeah, so Rehab to Perform really came about from an idea standpoint when I was in college. I was relatively healthy through my younger years. Outside of having a broken collarbone, I really didn't miss any time. And it wasn't until my sophomore year of college I had my first significant injury, enough that I had to go get imaging, and I got a diagnosis of a torn labrum and a torn rotator cuff. I had an unbelievable experience with my rehab at Ohio State, and I realized everybody doesn't have access to a big time sports medicine department like I did. But I came home for the summer to finish my rehab, and I just realized how different the experience was for people in the community. So that was kind of where the idea came about, and Rehab to Perform was started in December of 2014. We have our headquarters now in Germantown, Maryland, where I grew up the first 14 years of my life. And we currently have 15 offices. We have at least 2 more going through the build-out process and 2 others close to LOI. So, pretty soon here we'll probably be about a 20-person company or a 20-location company. And overall, I feel pretty blessed to just be able to take something that was an idea at one point in my life and to bring it not just to the local community here, but to the greater DMV as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite impressive, the growth that you've had, and we'll get definitely more into that too. And I've actually experienced Rehab to Perform both for myself while I was recovering from injuries, and also I brought my daughter there. From both perspectives, it felt intentionally different from like a traditional medical office. How much thought went into designing not only the treatment model, but the overall experience for patients and families?
Yeah, I would say that, the easy thing is to differentiate on how a service is provided, right? So you could do certain things to kind of craft the experience with regards to the conversation, with regards to what's being focused on during an assessment process, to the overall deliverables. But I think we've done kind of a step above that with regards to being intentional about the psychological framing of the experience, right? What are you getting ahead of time? What kind of education can you get through an email drip campaign? What kind of things are on the walls to kind of frame the experience? You're not here to rehab, you're here to perform. Progress in process, perform for life, all of these subtle messages that kind of contribute to somebody walking in to a healthcare or medical experience, maybe having negative healthcare experiences previously, and trying to position that person where they view healthcare as a get-to experience rather than a have-to experience, right? For a lot of people, having to go interact with medical is going to be a grudge purchase, right? It's going to be something where they go, I'm injured, I got to go see, my physician, I've got to go see the podiatrist, I've got to go see the dentist, I've got to go see the physical therapist. So we've tried to look at this holistically and unpack these different elements that could be viewed as being, points of friction or ways that people would perceive something to be negative, and instead creating a situation where I think a lot of people end up enjoying their rehab experience. They enjoy their PT. It's not something where they feel like their arm's being twisted to go back and to carve out time and contribute their funds or contribute money towards the healthcare system. So I think at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure that people just view healthcare differently. If you view healthcare differently, you're more likely to interact with it at earlier touch points, putting yourself in a situation where most likely you're not having something as catastrophic because you didn't wait as long. Speaking for a demographic that typically, kicks the can down the road with regards to the medical side of things, it's no secret that a lot of men wait until things are really significant, right? Your shoulder is pretty much, unusable, right? It's not even functional at that point in time. You've waited. We want people to get to a point where they enjoy what we have to present to them from an experience standpoint so much that, hey, when it's small, hey, I'm just going to go in, quick touch point, right? I'm going to go check in with my PT, might only need a couple of visits, might be able to put myself in a position where I'm avoiding any kind of unnecessary surgery because I'm more likely to be proactive, as opposed to, pushing that decision years and years and years down the road. I've lost, baseline prerequisites with regards to, for example, my shoulder health, and potentially put myself in a situation where maybe surgery would have been the only option because I didn't interact with the healthcare system earlier. So, you're really trying to just create something that I'd say probably mirrors the fitness world a little bit more. A lot of people, when they choose a place to improve their fitness, it is a choice, right? It is not a have to, it is a I get to, and I'm going here because I like the people, I like the community, I like the way this place feels. It's experiential, right? It touches at all of your senses, right? It is something that you walk out of and you leave feeling better, right? You didn't view that as being a waste of time or being negative or anything like that. And I think that's largely what people will associate with a traditional healthcare experience. And at this point, we're coming up on our 12-year anniversary later this year, and I think that we're fulfilling that mission that we set out, in 2014.
And one thing you touched on there that I think a lot of people don't realize is that you have the diagnosis levels, you don't have to go to a doctor first.
Yes.
And get the prescription because you have that sort of stuff there. It doesn't feel like you're the doctor, but people are like, oh, I got to first go to this doctor and then I can go there. But right. You have kind of the full package.
Absolutely. And I think for a lot of people, they might not be aware that physical therapy is something that they can go straight to. Direct access is the phrase for anybody who's unsure of what you might do when you get injured. Let's say you don't have something traumatic. You had minor discomfort pop up, and something that's kind of nagging. You probably don't need to get imaging, right? For most people, even your insurance is going to say, hey, you need to go do a course of physical therapy first before we do imaging. Imaging is more expensive, and we're realizing more and more that conservative care, more often than not, is going to be the choice for most people. So if conservative care is kind of that first choice for the consumer, then we've put them in a situation where they can actually go do that. They don't need a referral, or in certain terms, they don't need a gatekeeper, right? They don't need to go get approval from this person to go over here. I'm able to say, hey, I have something going on with me. I can go straight to this person. This person being a physical therapist. They elevated the physical therapy degree from a bachelor's to a master's to a clinical doctorate. The clinical doctorate allows us to see somebody, have a certain amount of education to do what's called differential diagnosis, where if you came and saw us and you might need sent to a surgeon or you might need to go get some imaging, we're going to send you to the right people, knowing that this is not on our playing field, right? So there are things called red flags that you would be screening for, certain things that we could do testing-wise with regards to you moving or us moving you, to have a better idea of whether or not it's something that falls under that umbrella of, hey, we can address this with conservative care, or, hey, we need to go get more information. So direct access has been tremendous. Fortunately for me, that's the only way that I've interacted as a healthcare professional. I've been a PT for a little over 15 years at this point in time. And then that allows you to do what's called direct-to-consumer marketing, where you can go out and develop relationships. Not that we don't enjoy our orthopedic surgeon relationships, our physician relationships, but it's very, very nice for us not to rely on somebody else to send us people. Instead, we can go out in the community, generate relationships in the fitness spaces, schools, youth sports. Let's say you're a tactical athlete or your first responder community, business world, all of these different places. Do what we call as, value out, communicate all of the, potential benefits of focusing on movement health, right? Competency, capacity, and conditioning, and ideally putting people in the best possible position where, if something does pop up, we're going to educate you, we're going to empower you, and ideally allow you to operate a little bit differently, knowing that, if we've done our part with regards to giving you that information, that you might be able to do self-care or maintenance a little bit different. And I think that the more that people have an understanding of how things are changing within the healthcare system, that some of the maybe myths and misconceptions that they once thought to be true, allow them to operate differently, maybe not be in a position where they're going to need things like surgery, shots, or prescriptions, which we can all probably agree are things that we don't want and potentially are going to have some side effects in one way or the other.
Gotcha. And your own experience with physical therapy as a Division I lacrosse player helped you avoid surgery. How did that influence your decision to enter the profession? Yeah,
I think for me, when you hear surgery, when you hear torn labrum and torn rotator cuff, there's probably a certain amount of fear, right? There's a certain amount of uncertainty. I'd never really been sidelined outside of a broken collarbone in 8th grade. I'd been healthy all throughout my high school career. Had a really good experience. Obviously, my first year at Ohio State. And somebody is telling you that you might be sidelined. I think that's where, that fear, uncertainty comes up. And fortunately, I had people around me. I had a support system, right? I had great people. Jeannie Noman, who just retired at Ohio State. She went from PT, AT. She was our head PT at the time. She ended up being assistant athletic director at Ohio State and just retired. I had such a good relationship with her. Some of the strength coaches there were phenomenal. I can even think of the physician, Dr. Borchers, who said, hey, this is where you're at and this is what I'm seeing. You can certainly try to play and see how it goes. If things get worse, you might need surgery sooner. But all of those people, I think, help shape an experience where, I was just mentioning a little while ago, they educated me, right? Mm-hmm. They told me big picture what was going on. They were able to communicate short term what we would need to do. They would communicate potential options long-term, end of the season, potentially earlier. And then the people that went through the day-to-day with me, right, helped answer a lot of questions. I'm a big question guy. I'm very curious. And helped me have more clarity, right, have at least as much certainty as possible. Helped me understand that modification is a lot better than rest with regards to rehab. Helping me understand that if we worked on certain things from a competency and capacity standpoint and maintained conditioning, we kept me as involved as I could possibly be, that I was going to be better off. That despite my imaging, despite that picture that they took, which is valuable information, it wasn't necessarily a sentence for me. It didn't mean if A, then B. It was more of if A, then we could have B, C, or D. And obviously I was an active participant in the process, very motivated to continue playing. I was able to continue playing that year, obviously with certain modifications to practice and fortunately not needing anything stronger than maybe a little bit of Motrin before games. But those are the choices you make as an athlete. And I really think that, the relationship side of things, the way that it changed my life and my outlook on something that a lot of people might equate as a sentence with a certain amount of absolute, hey, you tore your rotator cuff and your labrum, you're going to need surgery. Where instead, we're in a situation today where people can have a torn meniscus and you don't need a surgery just because you have a torn meniscus. You could have a torn labrum, doesn't mean you need a surgery, right? So what do we want those people to do? We want them to go be curious, like I am, ask questions, right? Learn about your body, learn about what prerequisites you might have, what demographic norms, right? I'm a 40-year-old male, what a majority of 40-year-old men, what should they be capable of doing, right? So how can I build out my movement health foundation as much as possible where I minimize the effect of that picture? So I think that entire experience myself, I mean, it was transformational. I think my life would be very, very different. And not saying bad, but it just would have been different if I had had to go and get that surgery, or maybe I decided to call it quits on the season early on and I didn't go through this fact-finding journey and, you know, doing some exploration and learning a lot about myself and the way that a profession was evolving. And I think largely our way of doing things in the PT space, you know, we've been more on the forefront for a while now. I think you're seeing a lot more businesses look like it or pull elements of inspiration from how we're doing things. And it does leave me very, very optimistic, like that when like my career is over, I think we, especially with the target demographic that we are attracting, which is largely, our average age is 38, which is significantly younger than a lot of healthcare places. But that at least me very, very optimistic that we're going to be able to change some of the narratives within the healthcare space and potentially put people in a situation where they're just looking at injuries and imaging a lot different.
Gosh, I don't know if you know this, but I had a torn labrum as well. I had surgery. I actually needed it because it was 20 years of doing damage to it.
Absolutely.
But
and there's times where it's appropriate. I'm not saying
no.
Right?
I wasn't,
it was the if A then B then C then, you know, just understanding that there's not absolutes.
Yeah.
Right? So
now, do you think about like what would have happened if you didn't get hurt? Like, it seems like that was actually possibly one of the most positive things that happened in your life.
Absolutely. I don't know what I would have ended up in from a profession standpoint. I was exploring a lot. I was exploring, like, do I want to be an orthopedic surgeon? Do I want to be a PA? Do I want to be a PT? And I think this combined my love of fitness. Like, I really, really enjoy working out. I enjoy playing sports. I just enjoy being active. I enjoy being on my feet. And I think that without that experience, I mean, gosh, maybe I never would have fallen in love with something. But then, I mean, to be honest, like, the real thing that I ended up doing was business, right? I think that was an opportunity where I saw a problem that was not being solved in my community, right? I was like, why do I have this unbelievable experience at where I go to college, and then I come home and there's this massive contrast? Like, this doesn't make sense. This should not just be reserved for elite levels of sport. This should be reserved for everyone. And that was really where I think you probably pull pieces. For anybody that remembers the Gazette, like, one of my first jobs was delivering the Montgomery County Gazette. You know, I mowed lawns early on. I did swim lessons. I think there were certain entrepreneurial, like, things that I was doing that, you know, sometimes the right place, right time, the aggregation of all of these different touch points in your life kind of come together. And I feel very fortunate with regards to where it took me.
That's great. And so you've described the first clinic as a type of minimum viable product. What did the first version of Rehab to Perform look like? And what would surprise people that only know about the company today?
Gosh, two really, really good questions. I think early on when you're coming up with an MVP, you're just trying to get something out there and probably not have a lot of polish or all of the bells and whistles. But you're trying to be able to say, hey, I'm doing this service a little bit differently, and is it sticky enough, or do people enjoy it enough that they want to tell their friends about it, right? So you got to get out in front of brand new people. You got to tell them, hey, this is how we're doing things. So, you know, addressing your avatar, making sure that your messaging is dialed in, and then having people come in because they're curious that, hey, I have a problem and you sound like you have a different solution than I'm used to. So we didn't have a lot of the facility upgrades. I wouldn't say it was as experiential when you were walking into the place. Colors, brands, like phrases, you know, equipment side of things. Like, you literally walked into a room and we had tables, we had a little waiting room, we had a front desk. And I would say that it was very just plain. Like, it wasn't anything other than we were going to differentiate on service. There was not what I would consider like an ecosystem to support the service that made it more than what it was. So, you know, we were up at Frederick Indoor Sports Center. It was a very easy sublease for anybody that's kind of done a startup before. Sometimes it's very, very easy to go occupy space that's already built out, no cost there. I had to change the flooring, and that was about it. We could walk out, and we could use the gym equipment was there. And that was it. And we struggled early on. It's one thing to think that you can do something, but you don't realize how hard business is until you really just kind of like quite honestly, like cut the cord. But we were fortunate within about 18 months that we were in a situation where we'd kind of outgrown the space. And there were certain friction points there that I think that just put us in a position where it made a lot of sense to move. And now we moved, and we're still there. That first brick and mortar for us was right next to the Frederick Airport up there. It's been very, very good. That's still what I would consider like our flagship facility because it's the biggest one. It's a little over 9,000 square feet. But that MVP early on, you're literally just testing and trialing something enough to see if you have people experience it and they think it's as special as you are. You do, right? And we were fortunate that we had some people early on that were influential, whether or not it was local orthopedics. I can still think, and I don't want to name the one, but they allowed us to help rehab their young high school age daughter. And there's certain situations that then word travels, and then you're sitting there. And quite honestly, I think the biggest moment where I realized we had something special was probably after we moved into the brick and mortar. You have a 5 and 5, so you have a 5-year lease with a 5-year extension, and was it July of 2017? We're sitting there and we're like, holy, we thought we would only be able to put 4 PTs in here, and that was throughout the entire lease, but we have 6 PTs here. What do we do? Like we are busier than we ever thought we would be. Then you go open the second office down in Germantown. That was where I grew up. I went to McCullough and Clemente, and I felt like we had a lot of community connections there. And then you're in a situation where you learn how people dependent your business is and how not process dependent it is. And that was probably harder than starting in that sublet space and going than our first brick and mortar, because you started at step 2 with a second location, and you didn't have the sublease to kind of build things up and build this traction in the local community with low cost. Instead, you're taking on that big cost, that big space right out of the gates. We had some misfires, but again, we figured it out, we learned, and then we kind of kept swinging for the fences. I could go on and on about the decisions before the pandemic. I mean, we opened Mount Airy probably 9 months before the pandemic. We opened our Bethesda office 2.5 months before the pandemic. That was a time period where you definitely earned your stripes.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we're still here today, and we're thriving. But it's awesome to look back at your early idea of what a service is and what a space looked like, and just kind of see the evolution and professionalize things to the point where sometimes people even walk in right now and they think it's a franchise with regards to the logo and the brand and how things are presented, which is again pretty cool to hear from people that are deciding to choose R2P.
Yeah, I mean, for people that haven't been in one, it's very, all the colors match and everything looks new. You have top of the line equipment, and just it's very well put together. And it seems like from the pictures I've seen, because I've only been to the Germantown one, but it seems like it's very repeated, where each new one has the same frameworks and the same pieces and everything.
Yeah, not to go into it too much, but something that we did when we opened the second office and we realized that we had a process-related and playbook-related issue is I went to a franchise convention. Not that I ever want to franchise, but franchises do things very systematically. They have their SOPs dialed in. They have systems and process dialed in. So we have things that I would say ensure certain levels of consistency and certain standards, right? If the first one went well, we want it to be similar, we need to make sure that we have a playbook in place there. We open the third one, you need to make sure you have a playbook in place. Now, the one thing we've been very, very intentional about over time is making sure that when we open a new one, we continue to have learned from the previous ones, so the playbook continues to get better. And then you try to make sure that the ones that you've already opened are coming up to that standard, right? As opposed to just saying, hey, we're fine with the first 2 and 3, we want to maintain. Or with some, because they don't have certain quality controls in place, you see a diminishing brand. But for us, I mean, we were able to do over 100,000 visits in the first half of this year. The Net Promoter Score, actually got better through the first 6 months. You're paying attention to Google reviews, staff retention, and stuff like that. And again, I feel like we've learned a lot over the years, and we're in a really good spot.
That's awesome. What personal characteristics have contributed most to your success that might not be obvious to someone looking at your resume or the company from the outside?
That's a really, really good question. I think that you could probably go different ways here. I think you could probably talk about like the evolution of leadership. I could probably talk about like just doing self-work and how like for a business to evolve, like the founder and the leaders have to continue to evolve as people, not just on the leadership side, but on a mental and emotional level. And I guess, I can touch on just those two briefly. Like I used to be a lot more of a hierarchical leader, I would say. And that was because probably like, growing up, like my mom grew up with a father who was in the military. He ended up being a colonel. I think that's a world where you think a little bit more of hierarchical leadership. So I think that might have been how she just parented, and I honestly thrive in that situation. I think a lot of the early coaches that I had, like I did well there, but then there's an evolution going on in society, and you hear the players coach, right? So you hear more of this collaborative leadership, less of a hierarchical org chart, more of a circular org chart, and you start to view things as, again, needing to be a little bit more reciprocal and less directive and less always delegated to. For anybody that needs examples today, I think a perfect example of somebody is Notre Dame's coach Marcus Freeman, who actually was at Ohio State when I was there, and I think that's it's a perfect example of a sports-oriented coach where people walk into the room and it's not necessarily, again, that top-down, hammer-down type approach. I think it's a little bit more friendly and warm, and I think you have people that are more educated than ever. And I've had to kind of match the demands or match the room where millennials and Gen Z, I think, are more educated than ever. They can't potentially be spoken to or communicated to in a way that, Paul Bear Bryant or some of the old business owners, even for back in the day, the strategies that they might have employed. Again, I think it's different. I think there's a little bit more benefit to having somebody that talks with you than talks at you. So I think that was a big one for me, recognizing early in my journey that although I had a certain affinity for certain leadership styles, that I had to evolve to better accommodate the next generation of the workforce. And then I think, honestly, anytime you plateau in business, I would almost argue that it's a reflection of the individual. And I think that anytime that we were plateauing or anytime that we need to bust through a certain problem area, I either needed to upskill myself tactically or I needed to upskill myself on like a mental and emotional level. So you're trying to find ways where you either have mentors who are helping you with regards to areas that you're ignorant or naive, or you need to go spend time with like a mental and emotional like coach or a therapist or something. And I've done both. And I think both have been tremendously positive for me, unpacking things that were either limitations because I just didn't have the right skill set, or limitations because I was going to continue to repeat ways of handling things or ways of handling interpersonal dynamics that just weren't positive and weren't conducive to a lot of people succeeding and thriving well. So I think those are probably the biggest areas, and again, that's a suggestion for people out there to look at yourself, look at the circumstances you're in. I think I've always had like a thumbs first mindset instead of a fingers first mindset, and trying to find ways where you can evolve. I mean, regardless of how old you are, you can still make changes to improve yourself, and a lot of times improving yourself, especially if you're a business owner, is going to have a trickle-down effect across the entire business ecosystem.
Yeah, and I follow you on social media, and we're connected, and I really I take a lot from some of the stuff you say about growth, personal growth, and like that thumbs first mentality is something that I definitely believe in too, where it's like whether it's in sports or it's in business or wherever you are, personal, right? Like if you're got that finger out and trying to blame everyone else for your issues, it's not going to be solved, right? And you can't control it, right? Like, why not just control what you can control and improve yourself and then get there? So you kind of got into this. You built a company around like constant improvement and the idea of being better than yesterday. How do you distinguish healthy ambition from constantly moving the goalposts? Like, as you continue to grow, like, how do you feel like satisfied you've accomplished something, but still continue to move on to the next goal and to continue to grow?
Yeah, I've struggled with that at various moments. I think that being somebody that is driven towards accomplishment, there are external sources of validation, there are internal sources of validation. I think you're constantly looking at both and determining like what's actually driving you, what's actually making you feel good. Yes, it's awesome to have external sources of validation. It's awesome for other people to recognize that you're improving or whatever you've put a lot of time and energy into is improving, or that it is really, really good. Let's talk about rankings. But then I think for me, like internally, you continually ask yourself what motivates you. And I think for me, I'm just motivated by figuring out the best way to do things. And I view business as it's an extension of your own personal journey, your own personal self-work, and what better way to kind of take that self-work and put it into other people than a business. So I think for people that are having success with business and wondering at what point is enough, well, what are you shooting for? Are we talking about money? Are we talking about vanity metrics? Are you talking about a business that just continues to evolve because you're figuring out the game more with more people, with more complexity? I think life naturally presents problems. Like, life is just about experiencing problems, experiencing moments, experiencing different circumstances and situations, and being able to find ways to not just be resilient, but be anti-fragile, right? And I think that on a personal level, like thinking about, circumstances that are outside of your control. Like, let's talk about the pandemic. Let's talk about societal related pressures. Let's talk about healthcare policy. It's like you have all of these different things that present themselves in addition to things in your personal life, things that are going on in your business, and you get presented with these problems. And I think the ability to resource, to move through, to overcome, and to continue to move forward and quite honestly win more than you did the year previously. And you could, again, argue what winning looks like, but I think that's incredibly satisfying. I think stagnation and being in the same place every single year, you just wonder, like, okay, well, at some point, am I just hanging out? Am I pushing my potential, right? And I think where this was going was the word potential, but I think I just continue in a situation. I'm chasing my potential, which I know still, like at 40, like I still have things I could be better at, right? So let's look at somebody like LeBron. It's like, why would LeBron keep playing basketball? He's literally going to leave basketball with an endless amount of records. He's going to have transformed a sport, but he still has what he says, the will to work. Like, I still want to show up and I want to grind with the guys, and I still want to continue to pour into this game. And I think for me, business is a tremendous game, and fortunately, you don't have to worry about your physical caps as much as you do, and you can continue to push yourself and figure things out and overcome problems that present themselves. And what's the best part, again, is like, if I got better at addressing problems and I solve problems, what happens when I move forward? I just come up with new problems. So, but what happens is you're largely more prepared for those problems, and you're able to move forward quicker, or you're able to move forward easier. So I think at the end of the day, again, like, I think of the word potential. I think of where we're at, quite honestly, right now, which is like, your vanity metrics are far exceeding anything that you've ever imagined. The amount of influence we're having across the greater DMV and soon to be in Baltimore is unbelievable, but I still think there is a better way to do things. And you could view that departmentally in your business, right? You could look at revenue cycle management and you go, I know there's a better way there. I know there's a better way at the front. I know we can do things better for our clinicians. So do we want to just sit here and say everything's fine, or do we want to continue to push in those different areas and aggregate these marginal gains to continue to move the company forward? And I think that's where, I feel pretty comfortable that myself and the leadership wants to be.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's really interesting hearing, the way you think about all the different pieces, because there really is so many different aspects, and the idea to being able to, okay, well, maybe we're tapped out here for right now, but we can grow here, we can do better here.
Yep.
It's
really like a squirt gun at the fair, right? I'll oversimplify this, and maybe you'll get the analogy, but when you go to the Montgomery County Fair and you've got the game and you've got the squirt gun and you've got the different horses that are moving down, sometimes one horse just has to just chill for a little while. And you've got to allocate your time and attention, but then you realize you can only get so far without pulling somebody else along, or pulling a department along, or asking yourself if you got the right person in the right seat. But problem solving, I think, is one of the central things that's always motivated me. And I think the ability to get better at resourcing those problems is probably central to why I continue to wake up early in the morning and continue to pour time and energy into a business that, by all means, like a lot of people would look at and go, yes, it's successful, and absolutely. And I am very content and satisfied with where we're at, but I just, from an inner dialogue standpoint and my inner workings, I know there's a continual better way to do things, so why would I not want to go out there and continue to compete and continue to win? And for us, winning looks like doing things in the best possible way, regardless if it's a people thing, a process thing, a department thing, or the whole company.
Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about growth, what is something that you've invested in that seemed initially to not be efficient, or not be something good, that ended up being something positive?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think I've done programs sometimes that you go into and you don't quite know what you're going to get out of it, and sometimes you'll get hidden gems, or you'll have a connection, or you'll be in a situation where you have insight created that you wouldn't normally get. Let's talk, right? I just went to Fanatics Fest, and I sat in on something that was sponsored by the boardroom and CNBC. It's called Game Plan. Walked in there, really didn't have a tremendous agenda, right? You go in there, you're in a room with a couple hundred people in the sports and business space. And you don't really have a specific idea of what you're going to get out of it, but you walk in with an open mind. And you've got LeBron having conversations, right? You've got Adam Silver having conversations. You've got Kathy Engelbert, right? And these are people obviously in the basketball space. Dana White's there. You have Adam Rubin, who puts on the whole Fanatic Fest thing. And I think that when I've walked into some of those situations and you have an open mind and you're able to pull inspiration from other places, I think that's probably been more influential than anything. Whereas some of the times I've gone into programs and I've had, specific, hey, I'm going in, I signed up for a specific program to get specific result. Sometimes you end up probably a little bit more underwhelmed. So I think at this stage of the game, I'm largely pulling inspiration from places that maybe people wouldn't typically think of when they think of changing a healthcare business, or even changing somebody on a personal level that's running a healthcare business. But I don't know if that's kind of what you were getting at, but I think I'm open at this point. I'm very, very open to inspiration from other places. And you go to a place like that, you get notes, you get kind of an aha moment, and then you're trying to figure out, what's the best way to take this back to my team and potentially put some action behind it.
That's very interesting. Not where I was going, but definitely.
Yeah,
I think it was very interesting. Yeah. Did you get to meet any of those people? The big
no.
It was a big room.
It was good. Big room. They were up on stage. They were doing Q&A and stuff like that, and it was a little bit more focused on the sports and business space. It was, it was pretty cool. I'm not like a raving sport. I love sports, but I'm not like a huge consumer goods blocking my Saturday and Sunday to be what I would consider a fan. So I don't know that the Fanatics Fest portion was my jam. It's for people that aren't familiar. When you think a lot of the consumer goods associated with fandom, I would say that is largely that event. This was kind of like a nice little carve out. Rich Klein and Kevin Durant run a company called The Boardroom, put on with CNBC. and then got these people that obviously, I forgot, Lindsey Vaughn was up there after her recent surgery, and got some people that obviously cross the lines, aren't just probably involved in the sports side, but have a business element to them too.
And you've actually talked a few times about like sports. Do you still play any sports?
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. So I finished my lacrosse career at 25. I've kind of dabbled in, your local flag football stuff, your kickball, your basketball. I think I've gotten to this stage where I'm aware enough that I am having more birthdays, and that for me, like having a catastrophic moment would probably significantly affect my ability to show up at work, to show up as a family man, and it probably would just take away from a lot of the things that I'm doing right now. So I'm very active. I do a lot of fitness, but at competitive sports, my best days are behind me. And if I'm competing at this point in time, it might be something more like a pickleball when we're at the beach with family or something like that. But I think for me, I'm aware of the lack of preparation that my body has, and we do see people in the office around my same age demographic, and it's a risk reward thing. I absolutely miss it, but I definitely squeezed as much as I could out of my body during the time window that I had, and I feel good about that. I don't have anything else to prove.
Gotcha. I was gonna say we gotta get you out on the ball hockey court, but I also completely understand. For me, it's kind of the opposite, where it's like the ball hockey exercise, like that's like one of my primary ways that I exercise. So without that, I would have the negative effects.
Yes.
But I totally understand when people are like have these other motivations and they're getting their exercise in other ways that like the risk of hurting yourself is not worth it to add on if it's not like your primary form of exercise. Yeah,
and I think for me too, like, and I'll just be candid, like I do not have a medium switch. Yeah. When I go do something, I am the classic try hard. I'm 1,000 miles an hour. So going out and potentially having to kind of like temper like my overall level of competitiveness and participation, I think would be really, really challenging for me. And I think I probably would need to do that to ramp up and do things in a healthy and safe manner. Knock on wood, that I wouldn't hurt myself. So I think I'm also aware of just how I'm psychologically wired. And then, gosh, not to mention the fact, like some of these like adult leagues, there's games at like 8, 9, 10 at night. I'm up at 4. I am not like playing a sporting event like well after the sun has gone down. Like I can't do it. So my hat's off to the people that still make time for it. But for me, I'm so much more of a morning guy than a night owl. That again, I had a lot of fun playing a lot of sports. Played 8 different sports before I got to high school. Like I've tried a little bit of everything, and I had a heck of a time with it. And I'm excited. Once my little 1 and 2 continue to get older, I'm excited to be able to coach and kind of see them experience it the way I did.
Yeah, I definitely had to learn that lesson of not going all out. Those like the same way. I actually switched positions from playing defense, where I had to be like constantly on it, like aggressively, to playing offense, where it's like, all right, I just try and score, and if it doesn't happen, I can kind of just run back. So I definitely can appreciate that, and that kind of goes into our next question. So was there an expansion decision, like mistake or unexpected challenge, that fundamentally changed how you approach growth today?
The second office. When we opened right over here off Seneca Meadows Parkway, it was a very stressful time period for me. The second office did not go well. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes issues. We were so reliant on just having home run hitting people at that first office, and we opened the second office, and there was no playbook to support the new people. So unfortunately, we actually had to, because things weren't going well, we had to let go of one of our hires because of like cash flow related issues, and I'll never forget that. So stuff like that kind of sticks with you, and you work really, really hard to make sure you never have to do anything like that again. And I think that's where, fortunately, I was going through the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program at this point in time. It was up at the Carey School of Business at Johns Hopkins, and I'll never forget how like impactful the operations block as a whole was. And for somebody that just didn't have the kind of business foundation, business background, I didn't grow up in a family of entrepreneurs. that was foreign to me. I was so focused on just deliver a great service, own a handshake and a smile, go above and beyond for people, make them feel like they're connected, educate, empower, deliver this unbelievable experience and these outcomes at the end that'll take care of it all, right? But then you realize you have front desk, you've got leads, you've got conversion, you got a website, you got a revenue cycle management, right? You've got marketing, you have all of these different other things that are going on that you need to also be good at to make sure that your whole business runs in a very predictable and sustainable fashion. So, that second office was definitely where I think that I learned a ton. And then you get confident enough to do it a third time, and then you open a third office, and you're like, oh, this is so much easier than the second one, so much easier. And then you're like, wow, the third one was so easy, and you get addicted a little bit, and you're like, let's do it again, right? And we opened our Bethesda office literally 2.5 months before the NBA shut down for the pandemic. It was just off like a rocket, So the fourth office was going exceptionally well. You weathered the storm during the pandemic for the first year, and honestly, we were still profitable in 2020, and that's where I knew we had something special. So you were able to turn an overall experience where, I was not sleeping, and quite candidly, I had to go get a medical cannabis prescription to sleep at night during that second office. It was just not good. I won't dive into the details of it, but you take what you would consider probably the lowest moment in the business, having to let go a person that you pretty much said, hey, this is a great place for you to quit your job and join us, and now I've got to let you go because we've got cash flow issues. It's incredibly humbling. But to be able to learn from that and to put ourselves in a situation where we were able to move forward, have a certain amount of certainty when opening new offices, a lot of confidence, and having something again that I think without that moment, I don't think we would be where we were today. And I do feel pretty confident saying at this point in time, a lot of people would have had to potentially shut an office down if they weren't able to resource the problems in the way that we were.
So during the pandemic? So
during that second office.
Honestly,
So you could also argue that potentially we would not have had the foundation that we needed to weather the storm during the pandemic because we had such good business fundamentals. And we were able to handle all of the different county rules and restrictions because they were all different. And we were able to handle internal comms. We were able to give people a certain amount of confidence. We were able to have certain playbooks in place that our staff could follow to keep people safe and continue to move forward. We were part of that as a essential workers category, so we were able to continue to be open, obviously with certain restrictions in certain areas, depending on what the counties were deciding. But without weathering the storm of that second opening, I don't think we would have been as prepared for the pandemic.
And that makes a lot of sense. And so how do you identify future leaders within the company and create a culture where they feel comfortable challenging you or disagreeing with you if they believe it's the company's making a wrong decision?
It's a good one. I think first and foremost, to qualify people, you have to allow their work to speak. And I think that not everything is objective, but to a certain point in time, if we're talking sports, right, because we've been talking sports a little bit here, you are talking about stats, right? It's no secret that your leading scorers, your people that show up on the stat sheet in a sport like basketball, make it very, very objective that they're your high performers. So for us, there are certain things that can be done in terms of delivering a service with regards to how the service is provided, how much the service is provided, the length that the service is provided for, certain things that we're looking at where you need to have a dashboard that supports you being a high achiever in the company ecosystem, right? Can you handle your caseload in a way that gives us a lot of confidence that you're taking care of patients, and you're taking care of patients in a way that is more towards the top 25th percentile of the company. Leadership, I think, is where you get into things that can be a little bit more subjective. And that is something that you have to take in feedback from other members of your team, other members that are around that person. I think leadership is a lot harder to pin something down on and look at KPIs or stats and say, this person's a better leader because of all of these numbers in this dashboard. So that's something I think where we have a pretty good pulse on what goes on at the offices. We have pretty good feedback loops. Leaders also recognize leaders a lot of times. So sometimes you are relying on your already previously established leaders to kind of recognize the talent in the room. And then something that we like when we open offices is we like to know that people have certain elements of comfort with sales. And I think that's a very, very big differentiator for us, that when we open a new office, we have somebody that is comfortable with sales. We're doing more to train them so that they can do certain things, so that they're armed with a playbook to take natural skill set and to go into a new market and say, right, hey, you're financially incentivized to see this location do well. Here is your playbook to take your natural gifts to then help us make this a success. Then if we go back to, what was the second question?
Like a disagreeing
part.
Yeah,
so
disagreeing with you.
I think at the end of the day, you have to ask questions in a manner in which opens and almost invites discourse. So I could communicate stuff with tremendous certainty, or I could present things and I could say, hey, here are my thoughts on this subject. Does anybody have anything that might be a concern, a thought, or a question associated with what I'm presenting to you all? So I think we can present information and then we can follow up with question, or I can say and speak in absolutes and I could not even potentially open the floor, right? I also want to make sure that I'm avoiding probably yes-no questions, because sometimes people are uncomfortable saying no. Right? I could say, hey, Jason, this is what I think. Do you agree? And you might kind of go, well, I'm kind of confrontational. Like I'm avoidance of confrontation. So yes, okay, good, I agree. Right? We move on, move forward. Instead, I could say, what are your thoughts on the information that I provided? Are there things that you would add, or are there things that you would change? And I'm almost leading you in a direction where you feel more warm or more safe to potentially provide a counter stance to what I provided. So a lot of that is up to me to, as a leader, to use my words and to put you in a situation where you're able to feel very, very comfortable presenting a change of course, right? If you're changing course or presenting something that might be perceived to be discord, it's less confrontational, right? And that person, I mentioned for a lot of people, like I had to change my leadership style from very, very hierarchical and very directive and absolute to being somebody that was a little bit more open, that was more likely talking with you. Hey, here's the information on the table. You add your information to the table. Then we're going to kind of comb through this. And now we've collectively come up with something. Now, as the leader, I do have the ability to kind of veto things, but I also think you get a lot more buy-in when you do ask questions in that manner and you do allow people to contribute. You might still get to the same conclusion that maybe you had already made, but at least there is an opportunity for you also to hear things differently and probably get inspired from people on your own team. I heard it best recently, like who, as a leader, do you want to find yourself taking in information from the most? A lot of times it's probably the newest people in the company. And I know that they also don't have a lot of context with regards to being around the company for a long period of time, but they're going to probably have some fresh perspective. And I think young people have a lot greater pulse on culture and some of the things that are going on, where certain other people can kind of be set in their ways. We're busy, we know how to do things, and their lens gets a little bit more narrow. So they can go a lot of different ways, but I think, again, qualification of the leader is one thing, and then it's up to the leaders to ask questions and lead people in a direction where they do feel like it is safe for them to provide a counter stance to whatever the narrative is that is being presented.
That's great. I love that perspective of the way that you approach the questions, right? Because again, you're putting it on yourself, right? Not putting it on, them to speak up or to break out of that yes, no.
Right.
You're saying, how can I lead them to the right, approach?
For sure. And I'll take this a step further because you've been in our four walls. A final question at the end of every session, and I could go A or B with this. Do you have any questions? Or I could say, what questions do you have for me? Do you have any questions automatically as a yes, no, which we don't want.
Right.
What questions do you have? You almost feel like you should ask a question. So if you had something at the top of your mind that you were about to ask, you're probably more likely to just go ahead and ask it, instead of having to get permission to potentially ask that question. And I know it's small, but we're getting into playing a psychological game of comfort and challenging things and potentially putting people in a situation where they're not feeling like they're encroaching on how somebody else does things, or making somebody feel like they didn't do a good job of explaining things previously. And I think sometimes the psychological component almost is even more important than some of the hard skill things that are actually going on.
Yeah, and it's so subtle, right?
Yes, very subtle.
If you did those questions in like a silo, right? You said some one-to-one, and they probably, they're the same question. But when you look at them next to each other, there's a very big difference.
For sure, for sure. It's almost assumed permission, right? I could ask things in a way where you are automatically assuming that there is permission for you, granted, to go ahead and ask this question. So, it's, again, subtle, but it's something we talk about often.
That's great. And so what responsibility did you hold on to longer than you should have? And like, where were you personally still could be a bottleneck today?
That's a good one.
I know I keep giving you these two-parters.
It's a great one. And I think, quite honestly, like, I went back into a period of time the past year where I've probably been more hands-on in certain areas. Because I've also probably had some time to step back. So when you step back, you have the ability to look at things, and you have the ability to go, I like this, but I love that, but I like this, but, and then you go back and you go and learn, right? So I probably have a little bit more time than a lot of people in the company to go learn, and I can go pull outside inspiration, I can go get different mentorship, I can go pay for programs. And then what do? I come back in, and then I'm working with these people and working in these departments, and I'm being a little bit hands-on for moments, trying to steer a course and kind of get things all moving in a new direction. I think that's natural at this point in time. I think if you were speaking directly to something that I probably held on for way too long, that was very pivotal, it honestly was patient care, which is really hard for me to admit because I miss the interpersonal dynamics. I do significantly less patient care now, but the moment that I got out of the day-to-day of seeing all the patients is the moment the company actually got better. And it seems very cliche for business owners to hear, but like, working on my business and actually having the time to make everything better for everyone rather than being so focused on being the best PT allowed everything in the ecosystem to improve. And it made it more attractive for people. People continually saw the company growing. The analogy I always say is like, it's like your iOS, your operating system on your phone, right? Like, we actually are regularly improving the operating system. Where I think those first 5 years, I was just in the trenches, I was doing the thing, I was the Swiss Army knife, and we were probably eking along, right? We were making changes, but probably not nearly at the rate we're at right now. So I think the ability to get to a point where you're not the service deliverer, you're not the product creator, but you're the person that is involved more in being strategic, you're involved in company execution, your overarching mission is success of your people, as opposed to being the best at doing the thing that the business set out to do.
Yeah, that's a very, I think that's where a lot of business owners kind of get stuck, where it's like they want to keep doing the thing that started out being successful.
For sure.
But they don't realize that you got to get past that and not be, the one doing everything, right? And being able to step back.
And it's an exchange on, your time. You could sit there and go, all right, well, everybody's asking for me, so I need to see these people, otherwise we have no money coming in the doors. But if you have that relationship, then are you ever really going to change anything in your business that allows other people to also do well, right? I could do well. I'll do well. I'll see all the patients, do everything. Money will come in because of my work and my back and my efforts. But then if I'm so focused on that, how do I make sure that these people over here are viewing this as an appealing workplace environment? How am I pouring into them? How am I improving benefits? How am I improving the overall ecosystem, training, mentorship, onboarding? Can't really do that if I'm so focused on doing this. Instead, at this point, I'm focused on providing the best experience for our staff. And that's the number one thing, because I know that if we provide the best experience for them, they're all going to be able to take care of the patients in a way that is best in class.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about business. We're going to move into a little more about like technology and advances.
Yeah.
So you appear much more willing than many other healthcare executives to experiment with new technology. Where did that mindset come from, and which technology investment has produced like a much greater return than you expected?
I think that healthcare is always very behind. And I think that because healthcare is always behind, that presents a natural point of friction for a lot of people just to begin with. Because they walk in and they go, well, the person cutting my hair is able to do this, the person doing my nails is able to do this, my personal trainer is able to do this. All of these other places are quicker to innovate and explore, especially with regards to technological advances. And I remember one of the places I worked at before I started R2P, like we were still doing paper charts. Like there was like these huge manila folders of like patient charts. You're like, I can't believe this is going on. I can even think like to the early parts of our business where like we're passing around a clipboard and a pen, and I'm sitting there and going like, we had Prometheus boards in the school system, and here I am in this healthcare environment, and we're living off like a clipboard and pen paper intake where you've got to fax everything in and shred all these papers. And yeah, I mean, you just look at the other industries and what they're doing and largely go, okay, well, how do I adopt this, knowing that if I adopt this quickly, we're actually going to be ahead of other people. And we don't have the benefit of being private equity backed. We don't have the benefit of being with a hospital system. So there are certain things that are naturally we are fighting against as a private practice. So we have to be lean, we have to be innovative, we have to be an early adopter. All of those things go along with technological adoption. If technology can simplify steps, if technology can automate, if technology can remove things that are repetitive and viewed as being cognitively burdensome, you're allowing people to upskill. Right? If I'm allowing people to upskill and supporting them with technology, I probably can do higher level work with the people that we do have. So I probably also don't need as many people for some of these roles that are also very, very repetitive. So I can do things like change certain payment levers, and you look at like reimbursement or total comp per your staff. We've been able to change compensation for staff over I'd say 2 to 3 years that we've really, really been pouring into technological advances, AI, certain, again, automations. Our EMR system is very, very innovative with regards to the amount of updates that they support our team with. So I think overall, I pride myself on being an early adopter. I pride myself on forecasting and thinking forward. And if we have the ability to put our staff in a position where if I'm doing something 52 times a day, like that's probably gonna like exhaust me to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Like doing the same thing over and over. I can think of one of the worst jobs that I ever had, which was a moving job, and the commercial jobs were the worst. I love the residential jobs because they had variety. I had to continually figure out like, how am I going to carry this? This is different. Okay, who am I going to? Okay, I got the strap, and this is on my back, is on my shoulder. Do I need a second person? Whatever. Like the residential job had variety, which was great for me. But when I walked into a commercial job and I saw boxes, and all I had to do was dolly two sets of 2x2 boxes, like back and forth to the truck for hours on hours on hours. Like those were the days where I was shot, right? So I view that as being okay. Like a robot could do that, right? It's so repetitive, it's so easy. Technology could do that. So you are taking care of the people that you have, I think, at a higher level by freeing them up, unburdening them from some of those repetitive tasks. So I think I also see that as a staff retention mechanism. Like we want people to show up to work to be able to use their maximum level of brain capacity, right? We want them to have cognitive variety, right? We want them to be able to feel like they're doing things that challenge them on an intellectual level, as opposed to, again, very, very repetitive, tedious tasks. And then also, I mentioned different payment levers. Like you want to pay people more. And the more that we adopt tech, the more that we can grow, maybe not to add new headcount at all, but people's salaries can naturally move up, as opposed to us potentially having like financial growth and then potentially having to add in a very, very proportionate way staff count, which you're not changing payment levers, and at that point you're not addressing any of the things that are going on societally for people, and you're probably not going to be as competitive in the market.
Uh-huh. And so, yeah, you've talked about how AI is already kind of helping inside rehab to perform. Where do you believe that we should not use technology, like the other end?
Yeah, I think for us, we've really tried to experiment with a lot of technology that's not customer facing. So we still want customer facing elements, but a lot of the things in the back end and the back office are largely where we're experimenting with automation and AI. Now, insurance verification, auths, things that are tedious tasks that you can largely put something in and have an algorithm per se, like kind of come up with a way to accomplish this. Hey, the system's already done this 57 different ways, go ahead and do this the 58th time, all right? The one area from a customer-facing standpoint that we are doing more AI with is phones, because your front desk staff largely, I think, has been undervalued and overworked with regards to having to focus too many different places. And we are trying to allow them to focus on 2 places and not 3. So if you have a front desk staff, they have computer-oriented tasks, they have a customer walking in and people walking in that they've got to attend to, and then they also have the phones. If we can remove the phones with regards to a bulk majority, and not all of calls, but a bulk majority of calls are repetitive. I'm scheduling a brand new case, I'm canceling, I'm rescheduling, and I have a billing question. They're not high-level tasks. They're not customer-facing with the people in front of them, and the high-level tasks that they're doing are largely going to be things on the computer. So we are experimenting more with AI as a first response call, because what do we also want? We want to be a healthcare company that has no missed calls. One of our goals, and one of the things that is going on in the business ecosystem, is we want to get to a point where there's no missed calls, and AI is able to handle every call, at least pick it up first, and to be able to triage a lot of the different solutions before potentially then allowing somebody to tag out and to go to a person. But we're already seeing a ton, and I mean, gosh, last month was over 1,000 cancels that processed. Those are calls, I mean, you talk about anything in business is like death by 1,000 cuts, but like a cancellation is not skilled. You do not need to talk to the front desk person to just cancel your appointment. So if we can look at some of those moments and go, this is repetitive and not skilled, and we're freeing up this person that we care about at the front to handle their high-level tasks and take better care of the patient in front, that's a situation where we're going to explore a little bit more with the patient-facing side of things. But I would ask anybody that's on the fence, first start with things that are not consumer-facing, and ask yourself how you can potentially experiment with technology that does not have a first impression associated with something that could be positive or negative in your consumer.
Now, it was interesting. Do you think that there were more cancellations, or is it just like the normal number of cancellations just handled quicker?
Normal.
I was just curious, maybe there was a few extra people that were like, oh no, forget this.
No, and you know what? The coolest part too is we have told people that they can call on the weekends. And guess who picks up on the weekends? AI. You got a busy week, Monday through Friday. Sometimes it's really, really hard coordinating a call with your local healthcare company or anywhere. So hey, call on Sunday. Somebody will pick up. Yeah. It's not our front desk, but somebody will pick up. And if you have some of these very, very simple requests, it will be able to handle it. And then you'll be able to have this off your plate during the week. And we will be one less place that you will be having phone tag with or having some kind of uncertainty with as you go into your Monday. Mm-hmm. So that is another area where we're educating our new consumers early on. Hey, you're starting up with us, just so you know you have the ability to do this on the weekend. We would love for you to be able to start your week fresh, have your entire schedule and calendar organized, and at least have your R2P stuff be taken off your plate. So that's another thing in itself that's been incredibly valuable. We initially started opening it 30 minutes and then an hour before we opened, and then 30 minutes and an hour after we closed during the week. And we had such good responses to it that we decided the weekends was good, and it has gone exceptionally well.
So is it 24/7 now then?
It is 24/7 on the weekends. Yep, you can call.
Well, during the week also? Or?
During the week, we still shut it down at 8 p.m. on Monday through Thursday, 6 p.m. on Friday, and then it starts at 6 a.m. on during the week. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
And it's on the weekend, I think it's 7 to 7 both days. So you have a 12-hour gap both days.
Okay.
So, yeah. Call Saturday, you want to schedule, cancel, Again,
is there a reason why it's not 24/7? Is it?
We don't want to turn it on and potentially pay for it to be on at like 10
Okay.
o'clock at
Gotcha.
night.
Okay.
Like there are certain things that you're just
Yeah,
trying to
that makes
navigate. And
sense.
you're like, this doesn't need to be turned on. Like the technology, I don't need to pay for it to be available during that time period.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
I was wondering if there was some other,
Yeah.
like, mental reason, like
No, you're trying to funnel it a little bit
that
too.
makes
You're
sense.
you're trying to create new habits. Like you're trying
Yeah.
to like force people to be like, wow, this company is like, they're making themselves available on the weekends through this phone agent. Why aren't more companies doing this? It's so convenient, right? I mean, imagine if you walked into your Monday and you had every single like thing that you potentially needed to address on before the week even started, right? Then you just focus on work and your family, right? Because you have all your appointments and everything like that you already needed to potentially schedule like during the weekend. And I think that's a period of time where people, they have a little bit more free time, so they would like to handle those things.
Yeah.
Things are less chaotic. So again, it's been really good. We're 7 months into the pilot there, and we've got a nice KPI dashboard, and it continues to. Obviously, you're increasing spend, but you like what you're doing with regards to the tasks, or like what you're seeing with regards to the tasks that are being accounted for as a result of your spend.
Gotcha. So going a little different direction back to Montgomery County.
Yep.
So you grew up here and you built the company's earliest foundation here. How did this community shape you as an athlete, clinician, entrepreneur, and how important were like local relationships to getting?
Tremendously important. I mean, if I think about my sports journey growing up, I played sports everywhere. I played Seneca Sports. I played MSI, right? I played GSA, baseball. I played UMAC. I played wrestling and lacrosse up in Damascus. I mean, I did swimming at North Lake in Germantown at our community pool. I think the different sports that I played and the fact that they were in all of these different communities gave me a very, very good network of people that I knew and that knew me. And then where does that take you? You have siblings that do well in sports. They have their networks. You're able to kind of immerse yourself in all these different pockets and communities. People stay in touch. Then we had the advent when I was in college of social media, right? Facebook started, so it was a lot easier to stay connected with people. Even when I was in Ohio for 4 years, you come back. I didn't really get into it, but my first business was a lacrosse services company called Lax Factory. So I was doing a lot of stuff in the lacrosse community, different rec programs, and all of that kind of comes together. You start a business and you have a certain amount of social capital, right? You have certain places where you can go and introduce yourself and there might be a certain amount of familiarity, or you can go to, say, you, and you go, hey, I see that you're involved in this. Can you give me an intro? So a lot of those early relationships, honestly, a lot of our early traction could be equated to familiarity, right? Name recognition, going through your 7 layers of separation, 7 degrees of separation through navigating the community, asking for warm intros. But the foundation of the business was definitely like handshake and a smile, and go out there and present what it is that you have going on. Like people were very gracious with regards to giving me the floor, giving me an opportunity to speak and to deliver value. We didn't know anything about digital ads. I mean, we didn't have to really figure out digital ads a ton. Website, it's important. You're not doing a ton with social media space because it's still kind of like a little bit earlier on. But you have that social capital piece that allows you to navigate society a little bit more. And when you talk about needing a certain amount of impressions for somebody to feel comfortable making a consumer decision, like I think we were able to accelerate ourselves down that process. Zach Baker, who also was our first employee at R2P, had a really, really good foundation in the Mount Airy area. He went to South Carroll. So I think between the two of us, our respective networks, like there was a lot of reasons why we had a good foundation. We're able to combine that. Those first offices, you're not looking at a significant marketing spend at that point in time. A lot of it's just grassroots marketing and relationship marketing and using contacts you already have.
Gotcha. So a large portion of our audience works in like offices or spends a lot of days sitting at their desks. What are the most common injuries or pain, problems that you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, if we could go into the occupational wellness side, but I think for us, it's low backs, first and foremost. I mean, that's the thing that largely is affecting, especially adults, the most. It's the most common musculoskeletal reason for people to potentially miss work. That is still the thing that we see the most. Then you're talking about probably hips, knees, and shoulders. I think the recommendation or the advice that I would give people that maybe are stationary for longer periods of time is I would mix up how you're presenting yourself in your workspace. You could sit at various heights. You could move your laptop maybe around the house. You could stand. There's these tiny, really little like walking treadmills that are probably not much longer than this table here that you could potentially get if you're on a call. Try to find a way to maybe go on a walk. I know people that regularly will get on a bike when they're on certain calls, and that you don't have to be pedaling yourself to crush yourself when it comes to a workout standpoint, but some kind of movement is very, very productive. Other things to probably do, look up micro breaks. It's nice if you get really, really stiff throughout the day, maybe setting a reminder for yourself, a timer, where you're getting a notification to get up and move, right? What are your stretches? Okay, I'm going to stretch my neck, I'm going to stretch my shoulders, I'm going to stretch my trunk, I'm going to stretch my hips. It could be 3 to 5 minutes, but what that actually shows, it's almost like you kind of like excite your nervous system a little bit, and it's actually a way to kind of like wake yourself up, as opposed to your body kind of going in this like slow decline because you're in the same position doing the same thing for a long period of time, and a lot of times it's just enough to kind of decrease some of that stiffness. But outside of that, too, like don't be so hard on yourself. I think naturally, there are certain elements of being sedentary in society nowadays. Like, we're not having to hunt and gather and stuff like that. Like, we have a lot of creature comforts, but if you have a physical activity routine, 30 minutes a day is probably enough to counteract a lot of the negativity you might see around sitting for work. So, what are you doing before work? What are you doing after work? What are you doing on the weekends? I mean, I think for a lot of people, if you're a little bit time strapped Monday through Friday, find time for yourself on Saturday and Sunday. Self-care Saturday, self-care Sunday. It should be like a perfect opportunity for you to pour into yourself. So, I think those are largely I'd say more lifestyle recommendations that we give to people. But, appreciate when you do have discomfort or something come up, it is more likely the aggregation of a lot of things as opposed to just one thing. And a lot of people with a more dated approach would get really, really stuck on that MRI, right? They'd get really, really stuck on that X-ray. But now we're looking at low back pain very, very holistically, and we're kind of what are the other things that also contribute to low back pain? Something actually as simple as the amount of hours that you sleep could be a contributing factor towards pain, which is an interpretation of what is going on in my body. Everybody has very, very different ways that they approach pain. Pain, so somewhat, if you look at the biopsychosocial approach, is socialized, and there's a psychological component to it. So we're realizing that we have to look at the big picture individual, right? You could have certain things if you're looking at, depression and anxiety, which might make you more susceptible to having things like a pain experience. So just appreciating that you are, a multifactorial individual, and again, moving away from this thing where we just looked at an MRI and say, this is why you have pain. So when things do pop up, continuing to move, continue to be optimistic, continuing to sleep, eat well, and ideally continue to be physically active and to stay connected to certain things. Again, I recommend anybody out there who's had a negative experience or pain, or especially something like back or neck pain, but looking at the biopsychosocial approach and just kind of educate yourself on more the holistic reasons why you might want to look at more than just an MRI.
Gotcha. So thank you. Before we wrap up, where can people learn about Rehab to Reform, how to find the location closest to them, and follow what you and the company are building?
Absolutely. We have a pretty good website, rehabtoreform.com. You can find different guides on there. If you're looking to educate yourself a little bit, we're pretty active on social media. I'd say that Instagram and Facebook are probably our big two. That's at Rehab to Perform. On the professional side of things, if somebody's looking to connect with me, it's at Dr. Josh Funk. I'm definitely more involved on Instagram and Facebook. I'm also very, very involved on the LinkedIn side of things. So, don't be a stranger. If you have any questions, whether or not it's about the services or more the professional space as a business owner or somebody who's an aspiring business owner, don't hesitate to reach out.
Great. Josh, thanks for joining me and sharing your story. It was great hearing more about the motivation, decisions, and lessons behind Rehab to Perform, as well as how you continue to approach leadership, innovation, and growth. To everyone watching or listening, make sure to follow Moderately Moco for more conversations with local entrepreneurs, community leaders, and people doing interesting work throughout Montgomery County and beyond. I'm Jason Maxton, and this has been Moderately Mic'd. Thanks for listening.